Hey everyone, it's Mariana with Three Peaks Classroom. Thanks for joining me. For those of you who don't know who I am a grade 3 teacher in Alberta, and I'm here to share some resources from a Canadian lens. So let's dive in deep to the year plan that I created for myself, my own personal resource, the grade 3 year plan that's aligned with the Alberta Program of Studies. Now you're either watching this because you purchased the resource and you want to dive in deep with me, you are unsure if you want to purchase the resource and so you want to get a little bit more information before you buy it, or maybe you're a new teacher and you just want a little bit more clarity on how to create a year plan. So let's get started. So the year plan that I have here, that's just the front matter, and then same thing with my terms of use page, which you'll see. And then the next page is also the resource list that I have. And I'm not going to show you the resource list because I have my resources here that I use. So I just wanted to dive in already with the year plan template that I have here. So starting with September, I just wanted to show you that the way that I organize my year plan is at a month at a glance. So I literally have this printed and it's in my binder, and when I use it in my classroom. And that way I can see exactly what I'm teaching for the entire month of September. So my goal is by the end of September to have every one of these things checked off because I have taught it and I have covered that lesson. So it's in a month at a glance format. And then I've also divided each month, with the exception of December, each month is divided into 4 weeks. So my goal is for the week, I have covered every single piece of content that I have written down. Now, what I've laid here is just topic ideas. They're not exactly my lessons per se. So you'll see that I have a bunch of things listed here. These are just to remind me that, oh yeah, I want to make sure that I start the mapping unit. Or in health, we're going to introduce the PATHS kit. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit when we get to that part, okay? You'll notice on my year plan that my largest chunk that makes up pretty much half of the page is my language arts. And the reason for that is our school is really heavily focused on bringing up our literacy scores. And actually just this last year, we were going to switch our focus a little bit to a math focus. But regardless, language arts is the biggest program of studies section. So that is the biggest part of my year plan. And I've divided it into 4 sections. So I have a reading and a writing section, and then a word wall and a grammar section. So I'm going to start with the reading section. And you're going to notice in each one of my reading sections, I have a strategy, and that is my focus strategy for the month. So for example, in September, the focus strategy is making connections. And that is a strategy that I include because it's a strategy that I can focus on cross-curricular. So for example, if I'm reading a book in math and it's a book about numbers, I'll ask the students if they've made any connections to that story. So even though we're reading a math book, I can use that math book to cover some outcomes in language arts. So that is my overarching goal for reading for the month of September. So when I do my daily 5 stations, or when I do guided reading stations, or small group lessons, the overarching goal for reading is making connections. Then what I do is I have something called Reader's Notebook. So in my plans, right here, you'll see it says Reader's Notebook, and then there's 3 bullets underneath that. So what that is I have a resource here that I've created. It's just a visual journal. And before the students arrive in September, I section it off into 3 sections. And the first section is a reader's notebook. The second section is a writer's notebook. And the third section is grammar. And so the very first day of school, what the kids do is they all get these, and we decorate the front page. But then on the next day, the very, very first lesson that I teach in reading, in our reader's notebook, and you'll see I have it listed, a bullet point, is I am a reader. And the point of that first lesson is for students to recognize and see themselves as a reader. I had a student this past year, so grade 3, we follow the Fountas and Pinnell benchmark system. So when they arrive to me in grade 3, they should be at about a level LM, ideally. But the school that I'm at, like I said, we focus on literacy. I have students that ranged from non-reader last year to I had a level S reader. So you can imagine the spread I have there of the readers that I have in my class. So I want to make sure that every single student in my class recognizes themselves as a reader. And so that's the very first lesson that I'll teach. And then the next lesson that we talk about are what kinds of things that I read. And we come up with this list together, what kinds of things that I read. Now, you'll also notice in my plan that specific lesson, what kinds of things can I read, there's also 2 outcomes listed. And that tells me in my plans that when I am teaching this lesson, I am directly covering 2 outcomes there. And so the way that I label them, you can go back to I can go back to my program of studies and I can see exactly which 2 outcomes I'm covering just by teaching that one lesson. Okay. And then the last lesson that I hope to cover in that first week of school is 3 ways to read a book. So if I just do this. Now, I haven't colored mine, but I encourage the students to color theirs as well. So when we do any sort of lesson like this in our reader's notebook or a writer's notebook, I treat this as a portable anchor chart. So what that means is I will sit on the carpet with the students and we will create a classroom version of an anchor chart that I will post in our classroom for the duration of this week or until I move on to the next one. But the students create their own version in their books. So that way they always have a copy of it and they always have a reference for it. Okay. Now, one other thing I wanted to mention about the reader's notebook is that just gotta find a page. Okay, here we go. I have purchased from TPT it's an interactive language arts notebook or an interactive reader's notebook. And so I listed that as a resource in the year plan. So you can go ahead and purchase it. Now, it's not cheap and it's not related to the Canadian program of study. So I'm hoping to create my own version. But until then, I do like adding these sorts of clip arts to our readers' notebooks because it also gives the students a chance to practice their cutting skills, which I know sounds a little silly in grade 3, but kids do need practice with that. But also it helps to jazz up the readers' notebooks a little bit too. They always get excited when they get to cut and glue something into their books. So let's see, we talked about the reader's notebook. And okay, so same thing, moving on with my writing unit. So every month I have a craft, I call it. It's also a strategy, a writing strategy. But for that duration of the month, I have a writing goal. And so, for example, in September, our writing goal is ideas because it's really hard after the summer to get back into the swing of things of writing. And a lot of students don't think that they are writers or that they enjoy writing. And so the craft focus is being able to generate ideas. And so the first 2 lessons I have in that week are writing is everywhere. So just noticing that writing is all around you. And my heart map, I mean, you can Google what that is, but my heart map is basically everything that makes up who you are. So here's my heart map. And what this serves to do actually in later months, like in March, when the kids have to write their own personal narratives, I actually get them to come back to this heart that we did in the first week of school. And I'll say, here's a bunch of ideas that you could draw upon to write your own personal narrative. And I did that this last year. I chose to write a book about camping in nature with my dog. And so I was able to draw on 3 of these pieces of my heart map. So that's how I use my readers and my writer's notebook. I make it interactive. And like I said, the resources that I use for that are linked in this year plan. So if you want to go ahead and purchase it on Teachers Pay Teachers, or if you want to take a look at it, I linked it so you can go to her shop and you can find it. Okay. My next resource that I want to talk about is for phonics, and I have Word Wall Words listed here. Now, I don't have the phonics lessons all listed because I follow this resource to a T. I teach phonics Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and grammar on Tuesday, Thursdays. And this book literally illustrates everything that I need to teach phonics. And I love doing this as whole class instruction. I love doing this in Daily 5 when I work with students or when I do some guided reading. This is a phenomenal resource. I highly recommend it if you don't have it. It's a month-by-month phonics for 3rd grade, and I have the 2nd edition. But it literally tells me the word wall words that I introduced, and what I did is I divided the word wall words into chunks of 5, I believe, 5 or 6. And each week we introduce 5 different word wall words, and those are our focus words that we use. And no matter what, and as you know, you're not allowed to misspell those word wall words, and we keep them up on the board all week. Okay, so that's my word wall. And now moving into grammar, we do have a grammar section of our notebooks. Okay, and the very first lesson that we teach in grade 3, or that I teach in grade 3, I should say, is about capitals, and I use the acronym MINTS. And again, I'll make this anchor chart with my students, and I'll keep this up the entire duration that I feel like we need until we move on to the next one. So for example, if I look at my plan, I'll keep this up for 3 weeks. 3 weeks, and then before we move on to nouns. And then this is the nouns page. And again, this is found in that interactive language notebook on the Teachers Pay Teachers site. I linked it in this resource so that you know which one I'm talking about. Okay, math. You'll notice in my math that some units are longer than others, and that's because some units need a lot more focus than others. So for example, the first unit, numbers to 1,000, I actually spend 2 months on this topic, because I find that if the students do not have an understanding of place value after those 2 months, they are not going to be successful in addition with regrouping and subtraction with borrowing, because if they don't understand place value and why we have to put the 1 in the tens place, yada yada, they're not going to understand how to do those concepts. And then same thing with multiplication, they're not going to understand that, or division. So that directly relates and directly affects the upcoming lessons that I have. So I hit this unit hard for 2 months, okay? And then I just listed the lessons. So even though, like for example, in the second week of September in math, modeling 3-digit numbers is my lesson. That doesn't mean I teach it 3 times. It means that that is my topic, and every day of the week I find a different way to model 3-digit numbers. So we might do that with manips, we might do that with drawing, we might do that with technology, like with mathletics or something like that. So that's just the overarching lesson for the week, and then for those lessons, I find a different way to approach that topic. So I hope that makes sense. Okay. One thing I added a couple years ago that I'm really happy that I did is math games. So I really like to list or write down 1 or 2 math games that I hope to introduce to my students that week, so that we build a whole repertoire of games that the kids can play. And it just basically means that the game that I'm introducing is directly related to the outcome or to the lesson that I'm teaching for that week. Okay. Now, if you're not sure what the game is, just Google them. You can find a whole bunch of games just by Googling them on YouTube, or sorry, on Google, and on Teachers Pay Teachers as well. I found a couple of math games. Also, that being said, our school did invest in buckets of math games for us, and so sometimes I'll use those as well. Okay. Now, science. I'm sure I'm going to get some questions about my science. I have actually created my own science resource, Rocks and Minerals, so I can't share that with you because this is personal, and I'm hoping to create a commercial version for you guys. So I'm hoping to create a resource that I can share with you guys. But for example, like this font is personal, so I have to make sure that I find a commercial version of that font. But once that's ready, I will have that up on Teachers Pay Teachers, and then you can follow along directly related to my science plans here. So. Okay, social. I broke down the social units into the major themes of the program I've studied. So I start with mapping just to get an understanding of where all these countries are, but also that is, I think it accounts for 3 knowledge outcomes and a few skills outcomes as well. And then it breaks down into the different units that we talk about. So quality of life and transportation and communication and leadership, that kind of stuff. So that's how I break down my social. Health, you'll notice in week 1 of September, it'll say introduce PATHS Kit. And PATHS Kit is something that our school does. So my school that I work at is an internationally recognized PATHS school. And PATHS stands for Promoting Alternative Thinking Strategies. So it basically is a way for kids to deal with conflict and problem solve. and become aware of their social emotional regulation. So I hope I did that justice explaining that well. But anyways, so that is so our health year plan is basically covered in the PATHS curriculum, but I also like adding in a couple of other lessons as well. And phys ed, I always start with cooperative games in phys ed for the month of September. Just it's a great way to build get to know you games, and I always list a DPA activity as well. So for example, for the month of September, the DPA game is Quiet Ball, and I'll do that if the gym is ever closed for whatever reason, so like a celebration or maybe there's a presentation or whatever reason, I have a backup game that we can play in the classroom or in another open space in the school. And then art and religion is pretty straightforward. I can show you. Our province now uses this new religion resource, and I absolutely love it because it has an interactive website that goes with it. So if your province does not have this, I hope that they will get on it quick because it's a fabulous resource and I love it. Okay. The last thing I want to talk about is assessments. Now, in my year plan, I do not have assessments listed. And if you watched my video previously where I have 3 tips to rock your year plans, you'll notice that my third tip is to incorporate technology and assessments into your year plan. And so you might be wondering, well, Mariana, why don't you have assessments listed in this year plan? And there's 2 reasons for that. One, I did have them listed, but because our division moved to a different type of reporting system, it didn't quite feel rock solid enough for me to include it into this year plan, which leads into my second point. I find that assessments are super personal to your teaching style. So it would be really hard for me to list assessments on here when maybe you are a pencil and paper type of assessor, or maybe you like to do Google Forms, or maybe you like to do check-ins or exit slips, or that's totally individual and it's totally personal to your style. So I did not include assessments on my year plans, but what I do recommend when you do use this year plan is what you can do is you can go ahead and you can highlight the outcomes, or you can highlight the topics that you want to assess on. So that's what I will be doing in September. I will take my year plan, I'll take a highlighter, and I'll say, all right, there is an outcome that says to do with capitals. They can do capitalizations in their own writing. So maybe I would highlight that, and maybe I would assess a journal entry of theirs or something like that. So I think that's everything that I want to cover in my year plan. We dove pretty deep into the year plan. If you did purchase this year plan already, thank you so much. I hope you find it helpful. If you are unsure about purchasing the year plan, you can you can actually leave comments down below on the YouTube video, and I can answer them, or you can email me directly. But this has been something that I worked on extensively throughout the year to make sure that it's pretty self-sufficient and really easy for me to follow. So I hope you enjoyed that video. Thanks so much for watching. Please like and subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss out on my future videos. And I hope you guys have a fabulous day, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.